some Bengals news. At the Growler, we got you. Hot takes, interviews from your host, Paul Dangler Jr.
All right, welcome to the latest edition of the Growler. Paul Dangler Jr. here with you. It is a special edition here on this Monday morning. We're on the bridge. We're on the bridge right now. It was a little bit of an interesting offseason for the Bengals, where very active, you might say, in the month of March when it comes to free agency and business decisions and spending of money, $276 million to be exact, and then into draft season. So we're ready now with T and Jamar in the house and free agency first wave over. I know Bengals are like, but the guard, we don't have a guard. I know. I'm aware. We'll get there. I feel like this is a perfect time for a bridge episode, and nobody is better to bridge everything NFL than our great friend Steve Palazzolo over from Check the Mic, 33rd Team, formerly PFF. You know him because you've seen him on this show many times before. What's up, Steve?
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me. And I love the offseason. It never ends. Free agency, draft. It's my favorite time, actually. Team building season's the best.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I could never be an athlete, and I don't know that I can do what the GMs and stuff do, but I like to think that I can more than I like to think that I could ever do anything athletic. Like, I would love to sit and be in the draft room or in those meetings way more than I want to be on the football field. That looks dangerous. It looks like it hurts. I don't want to do that. I'd rather sit in the boardroom and talk about these guys.
Yes, we all feel like we could do that. That's why the fans just step into the seat of GM for a few months, and we're right here in the heart of it.
It's beautiful. Let's step in the seat of Bengals Director of Player Personnel, Duke Tobin, and talk a little bit about where the Bengals are at in their team build. We're gonna get to the draft because I want to use this as a bit of a Bengals draft primer. You guys have been deep up. Go to the YouTube channel, by the way. Steve and Sam, Check the Mic, crushing it over there. Draft coverage galore is up. I just got done watching an episode where you discussed how many chairs you've broken over the time that you guys have been together. I just broke a chair just like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, see?
And I got a brand new one. What's it like? You know, it's a great feeling when you sit in a new chair for the first time and you're like, the sturdiness that you get out of it, it feels fresh. It's a really underrated feeling.
I'll let you know in a couple days. I'm still in my broken one. This thing snapped. It's still, I can still sit in it. I just can't lean back at all. But I have a replacement on the way. Shout out to X Chair. They could be a future sponsor for you. But we have it's like a 15-year warranty, I guess. So I called them and they said, yeah, we'll send you a replacement.
Beautiful. Thank you, X Chair. If you would like to be part of the Growler family, we're here for you. I mean, I'll X Chair it up. I got no problem with that, especially when you hear about this beautiful warranty. Well, anyway, hopefully you don't fall. Certainly there's been times this offseason where I think that Bengals execs have fallen out of their chairs, probably broken a few in the process as well, but they do have T and Jamar now in the house, locked up. They spent the money. They extended themselves. You combine them all together and you want to have fun with numbers, $501 million between Burrow, T, and Chase in the funny money world. Regardless, let me put it to you this way. From a team building perspective, paying this money for T and Jamar on top of what you already have for Burrow, from a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being reckless, 10 being ideal, where would you rate what the Bengals choose to do here?
Oh man, I'm closer to the 1. I mean, I'm more like this is a 2 or a 3. I think this is a great way to spend money. I know there have been some criticisms of, well, look what the Eagles just did. They built their offensive line and defensive line, and they only build the trenches first. I mean, the Eagles have one of the best 1-2 punches in the NFL too. They have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and they paid them. Now they paid them earlier. That would be the one potential criticism. But if the question is, here's how I look at it, Paul. When you have the high-end quarterback, the big money quarterback, you can afford to really, really pay 2 or 3 other guys. And when you're listing what those positions should be, wide receiver 1 is absolutely one of them. So Jamar Chase, check. And then I think you're debating between a tackle. I don't care if it's left or right. A tackle, a pass rusher, another corner, and then maybe receiver 2. And I think those are the high value positions in the NFL. And I talk a lot about when you are building a receiving core, you really want to be about 4 deep, for if you're one of the best teams with different style receivers, so that when you line up at the line of scrimmage, defenses don't know who to take away. We've seen games where defenses try to take away Jamar Chase and T. Higgins goes off. We've seen where they try to play it straight up and you can't cover Jamar Chase. You will always have the defense in a bind, assuming T. Higgins stays healthy, of course. That's maybe one of the criticisms of locking him up long term. But this is a high end, high upside play by the Bengals. I love it. I love having that 1-2 punch. I love the fact that it makes the quarterback happy. He's been lobbying for this thing. And here's the one last thing I'll add. I grew up in New England, in and around the Patriots dynasty. And when you have an elite quarterback, and Joe Burrow is certainly that guy, what happened with New England as a dynasty, and the Bengals, they're not a dynasty, right? But every year, the Patriots baseline was the AFC Championship. And the couple years that they made it to the AFC Championship and they didn't feel like they could really go win the Super Bowl is when they were lacking on the outside in playmakers. They always had a good nucleus, but the years where the Patriots won Super Bowls versus, they maybe made the Super Bowl or they lose in the AFC Championship, it's when their playmakers got hurt, when Gronk got hurt, when they let Austin Collie be one of the 2 receivers late in his career in 2013. So New England even had that issue with Tom Brady. And the years that they loaded up and had, dudes to throw to, they were Super Bowl contenders. So I think receivers are extremely valuable, and having a guy like T. Higgins locked up, who's a number 1 receiver for probably 15 to 20 teams around the NFL, I think it's a great way to do business, even if it was a little bit later than people may have wanted.
I mean, and the positions you listed are positions that they are invested into. I mean, Orlando Brown at left tackle before he got hurt last year was playing some of his best football. Amarius Mims looks like a hit at right tackle. So you have your bookends on your line. You have top 2 receivers. Chase Brown looks like the real deal at running back for whatever that's worth. And obviously Burrow. I mean, on offense, you figure it out on that interior line, and that's the criticism. I mean, they do need to do that at creep back to average, right? What you guys have been saying forever, the Bengals have been really the model of that. They've been, because they've never actually been great, but they have been able to creep back to average a few years, and they've had one of the best offenses in football. It feels like they're built well there. What I want to talk about from a team building perspective is the idea that the Bengals are now really doubling down on this entire offseason and the way they built, and that is go young on defense. You mentioned the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles have done it similarly. They've hit on many more picks and have a lot of value there. The Rams, we saw this happen last year. A lot of their young guys, a lot of just letting these guys all kind of grow up together. What do you make about that idea? Is that when you're in a situation like the Bengals and the Bills of the world, the franchise quarterbacks with the big money, is that what you kind of have to do? Get a coordinator like Al Golden who specializes in development, go super young, throw a ton of picks at it, and hope that that's enough to get you to the level you need to go to.
Yeah, I think picking in volume, and I know the Bengals aren't always a volume picking type of team. They're not always the type of team that's going to turn 7 picks into 10 or 11 and trade down. That would always be my strategy there. But I'm not saying you have to copy what the Eagles are doing, because they don't just do one thing well. I think they do everything well from a team building perspective. But the one thing that they do is they draft the high value positions early and often, right? So you're for the most part going to get, like this year, I think the Eagles are going to draft 2 or 3 defensive linemen with their first 3 picks. And they pick defensive linemen when they don't need defensive linemen, because guess what happens a year from now? You need a defensive lineman, right? And you see, players go out the door and you have to replace them. From that perspective, I think the Bengals actually did make good decisions there, right? I mean, you have Miles Murphy coming in as a future proofing for Sam Hubbard eventually getting older, maybe Trey Hendrickson leaving, but has Miles Murphy actually developed and become that first round caliber player? That's more the question. I think they're doing it the right way and just have to continue to add offensive and defensive linemen. And then when you're a little bit limited from a cap perspective going forward, you fill in your linebacker position, you fill in strong safety, you fill in some of those other positions that are less valuable. But what I don't think they can afford to do is going back to like a Drew Sample in the second round type of pick. Like they're not afforded the luxury of, here's a blocking tight end in the second round. Can't do that anymore, right? And not that they have in recent years, but it has to be offensive and defensive linemen high in the draft because that's where you get them, right? They are premium for a reason. The NFL treats them as premium. And I'll say this about guards. You can find starting guards in the 3rd and 4th round. You might not have a history of doing that often, but the NFL does. And so you still kind of go a little bit by those baselines, get your big dudes early. Maybe you steal a guard as a starter a little bit later on. But yeah, you have to build the rest of the defensive nucleus now through the draft and start hitting on a few more picks.
A lot of pressure, really an insane amount of pressure on some of the new coaching hires. Really, I mean, they're really counting on Scott Peters to come in and be a development guy, was something that he really helped Bill Callahan do in Cleveland, and where the Bengals have notably struggled. They just have not been able to draft well at that position, outside of a couple of first-round picks, and Jonah Williams, who was fine, and Amarius Mims, who looks good, but like, finding those guys, that's the hole for them. And so if Peters can do that, if some new draft strategy, if they can reevaluate that and start hitting there, you feel so much better, because I think you look at the way that they've been able to draft and you're like, yeah, you have to be better. But it just feels like that's the one hole that you're concerned about. It's like, just keep Burrow healthy and get better at drafting and finding, like the rest of the league has, these offensive linemen, and you can feel better about it. But that's where I want to get into this draft a little bit. Give me a broad view of interior of guard, specifically interior offensive line, generally. Where's the best spot to approach it? Bengals haven't traditionally valued, certainly, that high in drafts. They've done it, but it's not something that they value. Maybe they do now because it's really empty at both spots. What does it look like there? Do you have to go in early? Where can you get fixes that can actually help you year one?
Yeah, so I mean, very rarely are there good enough guards or center that, Bengals picking at 17. Very rarely are you finding a guy, like if Quentin Nelson fell a few years ago, you'd say, okay, that makes sense. This dude looks like an elite guard. Everybody loves him. I don't think there's a guard necessarily at 17. It has to be later in the draft, especially given the needs that they have on the defensive side of the ball and the strength of this defensive line class. I think almost certainly the Bengals have to go defensive line. Maybe there's a corner there that makes sense, but I think the defensive line value is going to be really, really sharp there in the first round. To me, it's that rounds 2 through 4 area once again. I mean, I don't know what happens with Tyler Booker from Alabama. Had a terrible workout, but he was projected as a first-round pick. He's the one guy, Alabama right guard, that essentially is projected to go in the first round. Maybe a Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, who played tackle at the FCS level, then had a really nice offseason as far as the combine and the Senior Bowl goes. He's at 33 on the consensus board that I use right now, so a fringe first rounder who's mocked to go in the 20s. But I think there's a couple Georgia offensive linemen. Tate Rutledge impressed me at guard, who should be available probably perhaps in round 3. Jared Wilson, their center, I think looks like a good player as well. He's at 75 on the consensus board. And so again, there's this history of picking up pretty good guards in the 2nd and 3rd round. And I think that's how a lot of the NFL thinks about this. If you need an edge rusher, if you need a starting tackle, you do that in round 1. If you're looking for a starting guard, a starting linebacker, starting safety, you do that in rounds 2 or 3, because that's where the value ends up falling. I think this is a good enough draft class on the interior of the offensive line that there are some starters in that day 2 type of mix.
Let me go through those guys then. 17 overall. You and Sam were talking about the consensus board, some risers and fallers. Great episode, by the way. Go check that out. But it was very notable from a Bengals perspective. 3 names that have found themselves in the 15 to 20 range. And that is Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, and Kenneth Grant. Grant, probably throw him out when you look at the TJ Slayton and Jackson McKinley now both being here. They need pass rush. It's the one thing they didn't do in free agency. They brought back Joseph Osai. They're betting on Miles Murphy. BJ Hill is back. Like, you want, where's the juice, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're looking for at an edge or defensive tackle. Let's start with this defensive tackle group. Where's the juice here? and what feels like the best Bengals fit when we circle maybe those three that are projected to be in that range.
Well, Kenneth Grant's interesting because he definitely has a similar body to TJ Slayton, McKinley Jackson, but he's a different type of player. I mean, he is quick. Grant is, and my guy Sam, my podcast partner there. I mean, he loves Kenneth Grant to the point where I think we put him at 9 in our mock draft. Like he always ends up sneaking so much higher. I think because Sam loves him. So he doesn't play like your traditional, hold the point type of nose tackle. He plays kind of up the field with quickness, even at 330 pounds. So I don't think Grant is out of play, but I think what you're saying as far as they have that body type. Walter Nolan is the guy that's super disruptive to me. Former 5-star, very productive against the run and as a pass rusher. So I think he has that disruptive ability that they just don't have on the team. And I think Derek Harmon from Oregon is similar. He's bigger. He's a little bit taller. I don't think he's a great run defender, but he's disruptive. He led the FBS in pressures last year from the interior defensive line perspective. So I think Harmon, breakout season last year after transferring from Michigan State, I think he'd be a good fit. And the other piece of this is when you look around the NFL, again, teams are getting smarter with where they draft players from a position standpoint. And the reason why that positional value aspect matters is because of contracts. When we're seeing average defensive linemen, defensive tackles making $15 million a year, and the high ends are getting higher and higher and higher, it is a premium position now. So if you get 4 or 5 years now with a first rounder, 4 to 5 years of a super cheap interior defensive lineman, that's more valuable than ever, right? There was a point where you said, okay, get your edge rushers first and then your defensive tackles later. It's a pass first league. Well, the way the league's paying those defensive tackles, it's very easy to just take one of those guys at 17 and say, okay, we have just like a rookie contract quarterback. You have your rookie contract defensive tackle for a few years. So I think Harmon would be a really good play there. Nolan would be a really good play. Those guys are a tick better, I think, from a disruption standpoint than Kenneth Grant, but I wouldn't dismiss Grant just because he's a similar body as Slayton and Jackson. I think he's a much better overall player because he can rush the passer as well.
Is there, we've heard so much about the depth of the defensive line class. When you talk about the edge side of this, is there, there's a lot of undersized guys, certainly from traditional Bengals edge history. I mean, the Bengals have lived in that 265 to 275 range. That may be different with Al Gold. He sounds more open to adding a different tool to that pass rushing skill set. Do you view any of these edges up here as worthy, or is that where you take advantage of some depth and maybe you're taking a flyer on some guys in round 2 or round 3 rather than using 17 on that?
Yeah, I like a lot of the edge rushers. The problem is the guys that I really like on the edge have some level of off-field issues that are either somewhat documented or kind of behind the scenes or, starting to creep out. So James Pierce from Tennessee, there's rumblings about his love for football, whatever it might be. The guy was talked about as a number 1 overall pick, and he's not big. You're talking about the size issues. He's not huge, but I think he has enough power to play, very disruptive at Tennessee, only under 1,000 snaps of experience. So I think there's still room to grow there for Pierce, again, if he loves football enough. But I think he's productive enough to go at 17. Mike Green from Marshall had some off-field issues, forced him to transfer from Virginia. And I was saying if he had a Buckeye on his helmet, that guy's going top 10. But he's at Marshall, and I think he had 17 sacks last year, led the FBS, but I don't look at sack totals normally. But very disruptive. The dude just knows how to win. He had the highlight reel rep at the Senior Bowl where he notched Josh Connerly over the tackle from Oregon when he moved to right tackle. And so Mike Green, I think he's worthy as a player at 17. The other guy I would throw in there is Boston College's Donovan Ezeraku, he's kind of rising for different reasons. Another undersized, per Bengal standards, as you said, he's in the 240s. And he's not one of those guys that's rising because he crushed the combine. I think just the more people watch his tape, they're like, this dude just knows how to play. He knows how to play the run, very technical on the edge, knows how to win. And I picture all of those guys as great complementary pass rushers to Trey Hendrickson, assuming Trey Hendrickson's back, and, potential replacements for Sam Hubbard and, competition for Miles Murphy. Right. And defensive end, I think you do need 3 starters there because of rotations, because of the importance of depth. And so I'd be fine with any of those players, assuming everything off field checked out for all those players. I'd be fine with any of those guys at 17. and then seeing what defensive tackle looks like on the turn. But I think for Cincy and a lot of teams around the NFL, I do think it's a really good draft to double up on the defensive line, an edge and a defensive tackle, or vice versa. It is a great draft, especially coming off an Eagles Super Bowl where this is the big thing. Like, oh, you have to build like the Eagles do it. You got to do it. You got to win with 4. And there's like, this didn't change in 2024. That's been true for 100 years of football. But it is a good draft to double up on the defensive line, no matter which way you go here.
Last draft thing here that I want to touch on, and specifically kind of still focusing on the first round, really. Nicky Manwari, a safety from South Carolina, is coming to Cincinnati for a top 30 visit. That's very notable to me. The Bengals have very much pinpointed on their top 30s, who they think is going to be in their small group of decisions. We see this every year. The fact that they're bringing him in and where they're picking, and the Geno Stone question mark that hangs out there connects a lot of dots. You would think Malachi Starks would probably be in that same conversation. Is that stupid? Right? Like, is that going safety in round 1? I mean, we've seen this position be a problem since Jesse Bates left here, but is that too much of a stretch when you consider what's happening in Cincinnati on the lines, everything we just talked about, to go that direction? Or do you see it? Or does it make some sense to you when you just consider the talent of the players?
So I look at the draft probabilistically, right? There's no such, scouts often declare what a player is. This guy is a solid starter. This guy is this guy is that. I think of it probabilistically. So if I knew that Nicky Manwari, South Carolina safety, could be a high-end safety, if I knew 100% sure, then it's fine. I mean, that's a fine pick at 17. Problem spot, as you've said, recent issues with no Jesse Bates, the revolving door, missing maybe on Geno Stone, maybe not getting the most out of Jordan Battle that you wanted, whatever it might be. If you knew he was going to be good. But when you think probabilistically, you go defensive line because he might not be good, right? And the defensive lineman, even if he's not elite, is part of a rotation, is going to contribute, is going to add depth. And so it's just a better longer-term play. So that's how I look at this. The positional value thing comes in because you could miss, or a guy could just be okay. And I look at a guy, and then you look at what else is available, right? So I look at Al Golden, who already had a guy like Xavier Watts at Notre Dame, who is a ball magnet, great feel for the game. He's not the athletic freak that Nicky Manwari is, but given the familiarity with Golden and already having success in that system, if you could get Xavier Watts in the 2nd or 3rd round, I think he could be a great play after you already get your defensive lineman, or after you already, go defensive lineman, guard, safety, if Watts is there. I don't know exactly where he falls. So that's the only thing. I have a tough time taking the safety in the middle of the 1st round when you have pretty strong defensive line needs for the Bengals. So I would rather go with that high value position. But Manwari is a very good prospect, crushed the combine, flies around the field. I think he's a little bit better close to the line of scrimmage than he is further away. He's certainly not a perfect 1-for-1 Jesse Bates a couple of years later replacement at all, but he's a very good football player. And if you knew you were getting a very good football player at the NFL level, no matter what, then it ends up being fine, but there's always risk involved if you're taking a safety over a defensive lineman.
Same question, Jihad Campbell, linebacker, right? So value, but he does so much more than that. Do you even view him in the linebacker bucket? And is that also the same thing where you're like, considering this team's needs, you can't be going there. You need to be going premium position?
Yeah, I'd probably lean that way. I think linebacker is a little bit more palatable. I don't know that the depth is there. And part of this is a scarcity of the draft class. I think there are more safeties to be had on day 2 and 3 who have a chance to be starters. I'm not sure the linebacker class is there. I know a lot of people have talked about Campbell as a pass rusher, and there's a difference between blitzing and rushing off the edge, right? And I don't think Jihad Campbell is a guy that just lines up on the edge and beats tackles one-on-one. I know he came out of high school as an edge rusher, but I think he's more of a pure linebacker with blitzing ability. So that is more intriguing to me than safety because I think he's a very good player. I think he's the clear top linebacker in the class. That's the other distinction with Manwari. You can make a case that Malachi Starks is a better safety or a better prospect than Manwari, whereas I think Jihad Campbell's the pretty clear top guy. So if you take him at 17, I think that's more palatable because I think he has that true 3-down ability, can do it all at the linebacker position, adds a ton of athleticism. And a 3-down linebacker is still extremely valuable to me and harder to find, I would say, than a starting safety. I know that might be tough for Bengals fans because of it. This is one of the toughest things about team building too, Paul, is the recency bias, right? For Bengals fans, safety might feel more valuable because of what happened with Jesse Bates, but on paper, they probably made the right move, right? You can't pay everybody going forward. On paper, they did, even though it's been a rough stretch in trying to replace a Jesse Bates. So I think you have to kind of stick to that and say, okay, I think it's easier to take a linebacker at 17 than a safety like Nick Eamon-Wari.
Yeah, the problem has not been the paper. The problem has been the execution. The problem has been the development specifically on defense. And we'll see. Maybe Al Golden has a better hand at that. Maybe it was that the players weren't as good as they thought they were in the first place. That's why they play the games. And but that's why we enjoy this. That's why we enjoy talking through it. There's so many different paths that are in front of them right now. Stevie did an incredible job, as always, of ticking through all aspects of building it. I appreciate it. Make sure you guys are watching, listening to Check the Mic with Steve and Sam. And, they're Cincinnati local, so they're good folk. You know that you can count on them, right? And you might see them around. You see them around, say hello, and tell them draft premium positions that you understood the message. All right?
Just a head nod and draft premium positions. Know.
That's right. You know that they watched. You know
Yes.
you got a growl pal on your hands. That's what we appreciate. Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate your time. Have a good one, everybody.
Appreciate it.